Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me Nick Guillette. How you doing, Nick?
Pretty good for right now anyway.
It's good to have you back on, man. Yeah, I love your channel, Magickology. A lot of good stuff on there. Everybody who's watching, I will have the link below to his YouTube channel. He's got a lot of lessons on numerous occult topics, very well explained. But let me go ahead and ask you, Nick, how did your interest in magic and the occult get started?
So oh wow, this is blast from the past here stuff. Um if you check my channel, the my experiences with magic,
Right.
that video kind of goes into a little bit. So when I was in college, I dated this girl who had she said that she had practiced a little bit of witchcraft, and she had there's 3 books in her dorm room. I ended up buying all 3 of those books. And I can't remember which ones they are actually. I'd have to dig on the shelf. But you know, I was like, could I read those? And I was asking a bunch of questions and stuff. And she was kind of scared about me, like, trying it or whatever, because, she was kind of spooked by it, the stereotypical kind of stuff where like you don't know what you're dabbling with, that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you've done it and you have the books, so why can't I look at them? So, we ended up splitting up, and just I had so much interest in that. I was like, oh, hey, nobody's there telling me not to do it anymore. So I went out, I bought all 3 of those books, and then I spent like the next 6 months just I went to the library, which had a bunch of different books, and I would just take one out at a time, and I'd go to class, and then after that I would just read and practice and read and practice and read and practice, and that just
Mhm.
became like an obsession, which
Right.
to this day it still is.
Mhm. That's good. Um, Now, what occult books would you say had a big influence on you in your path?
um hmm. the like Christopher Penczak's like Inner Temple of Witchcraft and Outer Temple of Witchcraft, I think that those
Right.
were very, very good at helping me figure out a lot of different stuff back in the beginning.
Mhm.
um Craig's High Magic, I can't recommend that one enough, because that really it it explains so much, like the little nuances
Do
about
you mean,
how.
sorry to cut you off, but do you mean modern magic or high
Oh,
magic?
no, Modern Magic, yeah, that's it.
Modern magic. Yeah.
Yeah, the blue one where the guy's doing the LBRP on the front.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the book.
that one's just wow. And then I mean the Simon Necronomicon too, because that's been like my bread and butter for a good while. But I mean, if you're
Mhm.
talking like more basicy kind of stuff, I'm looking at my shelf right now, trying to think of which one. Um, yeah, I would say that those are the most impactful, along with one of the ones that I did get at the very beginning when I started buying them was a Silver Raven Wolf's Solitary Book of Shadows, that
Mhm.
huge one. I mean,
Yeah.
that had a lot of really, really great information in it, but I mean, looking back at it now, that's so like it puts itself in a corner with just Wicca, right?
Right.
So it doesn't really help you kind of expand from there. You got to expand with your own research and stuff like that. But I think that really does explain a lot. And then there's a couple of companion books with that, like To Light a Sacred Flame and To Ride a Silver Broomstick. Those ones are really good too, especially if you're at like the beginner level.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned the inner temple of witchcraft, outer temple of witchcraft. I have those in my library as well. I like to ask this question to different people because you get different answers. But one book that just keeps popping up most of the time that comes out of people's mouths is Modern Magic.
Yeah.
It's a great blueprint, great platform to start with. I mean, I started working with that in my early days of magic, and it really you know helped bring me to where I am. Um, Now, Magickology, where science, psychology, spirituality, and magic collide. Um, One thing that caught my attention was that combination.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you are a doctor, so you like to bring sort of a scientific approach to magic as opposed to others. Um, Now, I also noticed that you have a strong interest in the Necronomicon. Now, what
Yeah.
drew you to that
Um,
and that subject
so I mean, I've always been a nerd about history. You know, I grew up watching all the History Channel and the Discovery Channel back when those channels were great. You know, and they didn't just have reality TV jazz. And like
Yeah.
every Sunday they had spirituality stuff and stuff about like the history of religions and things like that.
Uh,
And when it came to, I always questioned the efficacy of everything and how, you know, what's legit and what's not legit. And I wanted to kind of like, where's the root of all of this magical practice and stuff like that. And one of the things that was that, you know, Mesopotamia, right? Because that was like the first civilization that had to do with that actually wrote their stuff down. So in the historical record, that's as far back as we can go. And one of the big misnomers about the Simon Necronomicon is people are always like, oh, that's H.P. Lovecraft fiction, blah, 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 you know, where it's not. If you take a look at the book, and I know that you have, you know,
yeah.
there's the Maklu series tablets in there, there's the Enuma Elish creation story tablets in there, there's the on the descent of Inanna in there. So that's factually sourced. Even the 50 names of Marduk are drawn from the Enuma Elish. So this has a spiritual backing. It has a spiritual basis. So I'm like, okay, this system does kind of seem legit. You know, like if I worked at it hard enough, I could make a fictional magical system based around the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, or even The Legend of Zelda for that matter. You know, but
exactly.
that's fiction, right? Because that's ideas that some people made up. Now you could say that arguably all grimoires and whatnot are fiction, but the older that they are, the more people that have used them, and therefore the more power is in the collective subconscious and just in the energies out there. So just the Simon Necronomicon was the one book that once I picked it up, where I actually had it sitting on my shelf for 3 years after I bought it, and I kept going, oh, it's probably fake, da da da. And then I decided to do some research, and then I started using it, and it's the one thing that I never was able to like kind of shoot holes into. So I kept going with it, and I remember I kept the book on me for years, reading it every day and butchering it and underlining everything and all that, and it sucks you in, you know.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. I remember when I first started looking into it, I was, I had heard the rumors that it was fake and stuff like that, but it's just the more I read it, the more it drew me in. And I just had to keep reading it. And then I would say that, anyone who says that, oh, it's not real, it's fake, try working with the magical system, see how legit it is.
Yeah.
That's a little naive for people to say that they haven't tested it out or given it much concern.
And the other thing is that like it's so accessible if you take it the right way. I mean, I had the Simon Necronomicon, and then when I did more research, it led me to the Necronomicon spellbook. So I picked that one up, and that's 7 simple steps you can do. And then once that whets your appetite, you start reading the book, and you realize it's a giant puzzle, and you can figure out one piece at a time. And then the more that you figure out, the more that you can add to that those 7 steps from the Necronomicon spellbook, and you can eventually build that entire ritual structure out of it. And it vibes, you know.
It does. It's easy, and a lot of it is just common sense. Like I saw that you recently put up a video called Two Candles, about how with the system it tells you to use the same 2 candles. Obviously they're going to burn down, but it's if you have like 2 long candles you can burn, because really what it is it's you call it a psychological association is what it is. Yeah. Go ahead and explain that a little bit.
So everything that we use in our everyday life we have psychological associations with, like the uniform that I put on to go to work. I don't wear that at home just because it's comfortable, right? I only associate that with work.
Yeah.
I know what on my car key is my car key because I learn to associate that key with my car. And everything else, like you wouldn't take a butcher knife into your bedroom, that stays in the kitchen. So we draw all these different connections and we build ideas around certain items to where we know what context to use them in. And the candles are kind of the same thing. If you dedicate the 2 candles for only Simon Necronomicon rituals in this case, then when you light them, your subconscious knows, oh, this is what I'm here to do. It's one of those things that it's the same thing as if you were to wear, have ritual wear every time that you step in front of your altar, you put those specific pieces of clothing on, and you're over time, the more that you do it, your brain says, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need to activate. This is what I'm getting ready for, rather than just I'm wearing these mundane clothes because it's a Saturday morning and here I am sitting in front of this table. What am I doing? It's the one of the ways that your brain hijacks the subconscious mind and being able to associate those things to make things more effortless, easier, and conserve energy. And then the less logical thinking you have to do, so you can step into that ritual space more to get into like things like a meditative state or the flow state, or being able to tap into your own energy that much faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about accessing the subconscious is what it comes down to. And you also had made a video on making things rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, take for instance, like, you know, with incantations, you know, you'll see in a lot of classical literature or just a lot of magical books, their incantations rhyme. Well, why is that? Because when you rhyme things, it's, you know, rhythm and that type of thing has to do with the subconscious mind. So really what you're doing is it helps you tap into the subconscious mind, which you do agree with.
Yeah. You know, it's the same thing with music. Why is it so easy for us to remember like the chorus of a lot of different songs? It's because the rhythm becomes so easy. You know, your brain just kind of works with that kind of stuff, with, you know, patterns and stuff. Even our brains, the brain waves, you know, they cycle at a certain a certain pattern depending on the state that you're in, and rhythms kind of follow that. I hope you kind of get the connection that I'm making there. You know,
I get it.
so
Yeah.
and rhyming things are a lot easier to actually remember. Like I know that when I was teaching, it's much easier to find a word that rhymes with another word rather than like words that are antonyms, for example. Like you can rattle off tons of rhyming words really easy. And what does that mean? It means it's easy for your brain to do. It requires less energy, less power. And that means that we're able to use that energy that we have on reserve for other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. Now, I mean, speaking of the subject of music, you agree with, you suggest for people, if they want to use music in ritual, go ahead and use music. As long as it has no words, and if it does have words, all the words have to correspond with what your spell is about. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, and even with the music that doesn't have words, make it contextually appropriate. Like if you're doing something if you're doing a spell that has like maybe a curse or a binding or something like that, you don't want happy go lucky David Arkenstone music, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
you want something that bumps. You want something like, you know, some from the John Wick movies or something like that. You want to play some Castlevania, or you
There
know,
you go.
something like LED spirals or shots fired, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, or with music with words, your brain hears that whether you're paying attention to it or not. Your subconscious hears that. So that's why every word in that music should have something to do with the context and intention of your spell work, because your brain is listening to all that whether you're paying attention to it or not. And if we're trying to focus our intent purely on one thing, but there's a word in that or a phrase in that song that has nothing to do with it,
It's
your
going to
brain's
throw
still
you
going to
off.
pay attention to
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And the focus is so important in magic. I mean, you have to learn to be able to, you know, train your mind to be able to focus on one thing. Some people like to, you know, stare at a candle flame for a long time, or, you know, look at a clock go all the way around the hand. You know, you have to learn how to focus, and you don't want anything to throw you off. So I like the way you put that down. You also mentioned about not using magic as a crutch, to where some people think that there's a spell for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like anytime some issue comes up, I want to do a spell for this, I want to do a spell for that, when really you should try to just solve the situation head on. You know, if you need to talk to somebody, go talk to them. Maybe there's some miscommunication going on. Don't just do a spell for everything. Can you go ahead and explain what you were talking about in that video?
You and a lot of the different things that I've read, and even when I'm on Reddit, sometimes you
Yeah,
get people that go there asking like, can I have a spell for this or that, or what do I do about this situation? And like you said, go talk to that person, or just say no, or other things like that. Because magic
yeah,
backs up our real world action. Magic doesn't just cause something to fall out of thin air. You know, I mean, there's some cases where that kind of thing does happen, but I would say that that's like latent pure will that's able to influence the greater scheme of things.
yeah.
But with basically, you don't want to use magic as a crutch. It should be a last resort, because it bolsters the actions that you have already done, or that you're going to take. So
Mhm.
it's I always explain, in a lot of my videos, magic takes us from where we are to where we want to be, but we still got to walk it. So,
Mhm.
you know, magic helps us get there, but it's not going to do the work for you. You do a
Exactly.
spell to pass a test, you still got to study, but it's going to put your focus more on, like, it's going to make your brain have an easier time with pulling up all the facts that you need when you're taking that test.
Right. Right. And some things are explained um differently but mean the same thing in different spiritual paths. Like take for instance, Christianity will teach this also, where they say faith without works is dead. You can't
Yeah,
just pray about something and expect it to happen, without getting up and actually go doing what you prayed about. Same thing with magic. You
yeah,
can't just do a spell about something and then just sit back. Oh, it's going to happen. No, you have to get up and actually go out and make it happen.
yeah. I mean, I harp on that acting in a chord thing all the time. Every one of my classes has the acting in a chord thing in it.
Yeah.
And one of the phrases that I on occasion make fun of is, God helps people that help themselves. You know, um, People help themselves and God takes the credit. You know, um, because the work that you put in is what's
Yeah.
going to make that thing happen. But magic is what increases the probability
Hmm.
uh, for the probable to happen.
Right.
It's you know in it's interfering with a dice throw to make sure it lands on the numbers that you want.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
Um, you had also mentioned about being fed on by negative spirits. Video you recently threw up where if you feel like you're having a lot of some negativity sucking your energy, or you're seeing things out of the corner of your eye, you feel like something's out to get you, but you don't know what it is. Maybe there's some kind of negative habit that you have that they're feeding off of that you can change. Maybe that'll just change your whole situation. Like, take for instance, if somebody has a problem with drinking heavily, maybe the spirits are feeding off of that. If you kind of
yep.
tone it down or just cut it out completely, maybe that'll just stop all that negative energy around you. Go ahead and explain what you were talking about there. Yeah.
So I mean, back when I started working with magic, right?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, when you start working with magic, when you're just experimenting with those energies, it's like a light on a porch in the middle of summer, and all the bugs come over to it, because
Right.
you don't exactly know how to direct that energy, and it's kind of bleeding off, and things want to come and investigate, or they want to feed off of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I just had recently turned 21, and I was very, very distraught because me and my ex broken up and stuff. So I was
Right.
diving into magic, which was great, but I was also drinking. And I have a video on this about shadow people. I was being followed by shadow people like for like 3 months straight. And every night I had dreams that was like recurring, or it was episodic. Like you know, every night was another chapter in this huge dream of being tailed by shadow people. And so just I know that that kind of thing can happen where like my energy was all over the place. I was super sad, and what happened? Spirits showed up and they were feeding off of that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I've been contacted by a bunch of different people through my YouTube channel and whatnot about people that feel like they're being, chased around or being fed on by spirits or being followed or what have you. And I always ask them, like, what's going on in your life right now? Is there any negativity going on? And every single person says yes. Now, I know everyone in life has something negative going on with them, but whenever you're dealing with a negative situation, you're not handling it like internally, you're not realizing that like that's their problem. That's not my problem. I can only deal with me. And if I need to cut that person out, or I need to take a step back from them or put up a boundary or something, that's fine. You're leaving yourself vulnerable, even when, like, if you've ever looked into Kirlian photography with the auras and stuff,
Yeah.
people that are under like substance abuse and things like that, your aura is it's faded, it's more broken, and we're just bleeding that energy out. And spirits are, they need something to feed on. And because we're physical and they're arguably not, they feed off of energy. That's why when we invoke spirits and what have you, it's candles, it's incense and things like that, because we're going physical to non-physical.
Yeah.
And that energy that we're bleeding off because we're distraught or something's broken inside of us, they love to feed on that. And then there's a feedback loop. I'm sad, I'm drinking, I've got a bunch of energy that I'm bleeding off, I'm being followed by spirits, then I'm afraid of that, so I'm even more out of whack and I bleed even more energy, and then they feed more, and it just keeps going around and around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a continuous cycle, unless they just snap out of it and just break out of it.
Yeah.
But one thing I did want to touch on is you had mentioned about the super ego, the ego, and the id, where a lot of people will say, oh, just, they don't get rid of the ego. They don't really think much about it. But, you have the super ego where, it tries to keep you in check, pay your bills, go to your job and so forth. And then you have the id, which is kind of like, oh, I should go ahead and spend this money, or I should go have a good time, Then you have the ego, which is kind of tries to balance the two. And you had suggested to circumvent the id and watch from the seat of the ego. Can you go ahead and explain that?
Oh man, that was a while back. I don't wonder how long you dug in my videos for that.
Probably like
So
6 years ago.
So, I mean, one of those things is metacognition, where we
Right.
learn this in meditation with thinking about your thinking.
Mm.
So, if the point is, your brain is, you get the idea of trains of thought where you're thinking about, wanting to go and have a drink, or wanting to go and have a smoke, or you want to go and spend this money on this thing. Well, that's what your id wants, because your id is only about like food, sex, pleasure, all that stuff.
Mm.
And your super ego tells you, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing that because you have a health problem, or maybe you should check your bank account. And your ego is at the behest of these two, and it's almost like the two wolves inside, and which one wins, it's who you feed. And if you're not paying attention with metacognition to those different things, you're going to get pulled or pushed one way or the other. So through meditation and really paying attention to what your brain is telling you, you can understand, oh, this thought comes from, the fact that I'm feeling sad right now, so I want to do some shop therapy, or this, or I'm really, really happy right now because I did something great and I should reward myself.
Right.
And then, so it allows you to think more clearly when you're paying attention to your thoughts rather than just being victimized by them. So with metacognition, you start to understand that your thoughts you're a little bit more detached from them, and you can get an idea of where they're coming from. And that's when you can judge them better.
Okay. All right. Very well said. One last thing here before we get into your books and stuff. I noticed that you have a strong interest in stones and different crystals. What stone would you say you find most useful?
And
why?
I mean, I think that could go for anybody. Plenty of people would have different ideas for this depending on their personality or what they need in their life, But
Yeah.
because I lean so heavily on psychology and the mind and what have you, then it's got to be, for me, it's got to be lapis.
Hmm.
And I was actually gifted this huge piece of lapis when I taught at a festival a couple of years ago.
Uh,
Um, and it fits, it's like triangle shaped. It fits right in my palm. It's huge.
uh,
And I mean, that's also because I'm drawn with the Simon Necronomicon, and lapis comes from like the mountains in Afghanistan and whatnot, just right outside of Mesopotamia. So, I mean, just working with like ascension and the power of the mind and what have you, then I would say lapis is great. And I would honestly recommend lapis to anybody that's working in the occult, because the mind is the most powerful tool that you have. And what are we trying to do with it? We're trying to transcend how we think and what we do.
hmm. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and tell us a bit about your classes and your books.
Um, so I have several books out that are that come they do deal with a varying amount of topics. Magical theater breaks down the standardized pagan ritual format by explaining like step by step how your mind plays a role in each of those steps, to give you an idea of, rather than just reading in a book about, do these steps and walk through these things and perform this ritual, the magical theater attempts to explain why you act this way, why you say this kind of thing, what doing this repetitive thing, or casting a circle, or invoking a god and goddess, why that works and what it does in your mind. Then, magical mechanics has my 12 different rules for magic, like rules of the road, things that magic can do, things that magic can't do, and important things that you are supposed to consider when doing magic, including belief, being the most important thing, and your energy source you're going to get it from, and what magic can and can't do. Um, and then one of my books, or actually two of them technically, Handy Sigil Magic and Kinesthetic Magic, are my own personal magic system that I developed with utilizing sigil magic, but through physical movement, where you activate a sigil through physical movement with tracing it in the air and a specific set of visualizations in order to hurl it into the subconscious, as was dictated by, I think, Frater UD or Spare. I can't remember which one. Um, and then I actually have them all back there. Um, I mean, my latest one would be the Powers of Marduk, where I did more of a historical take on the 50 names of Marduk the with their more historically accurate powers and abilities, and a way to invoke and pray to them. That's I actually translated the kind of invocation prayer you find in the Simon Necronomicon into Babylonian / Akkadian.
Right.
And
Okay.
I did that with the invocation of the fire god too, which there's a video on my channel of me actually doing an invocation of the fire god in Babylonian, which was fun as heck to do.
That's
Um,
sweet. I'll have to check that out.
yeah. And I got a fire going in my fireplace, and you hear me saying the invocation. I thought it was pretty awesome. And my classes kind of follow along the same lines as my books. Um, and I've got, you know, um, like my Magic 101 follows magical theater, my Magic 102 follows magical mechanics, and then I've also gone into, like, I have two classes on magical protection. I have one that's working with spirits. I have, man, I wish I'd pulled up a list of them, but I even have things like manifestation and
Uh,
um and working with planetary energies and such.
uh,
So basically anything that I sit down and I'm like, okay, what do I know that I haven't made a class on yet? And then I start parceling it out in a curriculum, and I make it. I've got two classes on the Simon Necronomicon, which basically the one's the Necronomicon spellbook, and then the other one is kind of your ritual basics with what's the standardized ritual format, how do you perform that, all the way up to invoking your watcher,
okay.
which those are all the steps that happen before the gate walking.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone who's watching, like I said, check the links below this video. I'll have links to his books and his classes and all that stuff, YouTube channel. What can we be expecting from you in the near future?
Um, Probably more classes that I'm going to be putting up, and you can check my website for those.
Right.
But one of the things that I'm kind of playing around with whenever I can find the time to sit down and make it is I'm planning on making a book about magic and time and how to work with, through journeying and different meditational practices, how to go into your past and see what's there, and also how to use magic to influence the future, which is arguably what all magic does, you
Mhm.
know, and abilities and magical thought and mindfulness and other spiritual practices to even be better in the present. So, it's probably going to be into those three sections. But that's honestly been something that's been swimming in the back of my head since about 2014 that
Okay.
I think I'm starting to put it together.
Great. Great. I'm looking forward to that. Everyone who's watching, go ahead and check out his YouTube channel, Magickology. Nick, thank you again for coming onto the channel. And everyone who's watching, go ahead and like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.